Tonight, carbon markets initiative in the focus. Why is a new agenda being pushed by wealthy nations? And killer of Afzaal family pleads not guilty in an Ontario court. We cover stories about defiance over Abaya ban in France, Palestinian diplomacy regarding Saudi-Israeli normalization, and how invasive species are causing the world monetary loss. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Aishah Ashraf. African climate activists are criticizing the recently launched African Carbon Markets Initiative. They say it promotes pollution and poses a threat to genuine carbon reduction efforts. The news comes after Kenyan President William Ruto opened Monday African Climate Summit in Nairobi. Critics argue that the initiative amounts to shifting pollution from one region to another and turning Africa into a theoretical dumping ground. A report by Power Shift Africa, a local think tank, warns that the carbon initiative will allow private companies to release a significant amount of carbon through purchased pollution permits by 2050. The executive director of Muslims for Human Rights says fossil fuel emissions and biological carbon cycles are very different processes. He's warning against investing in the initiative. Instead, he is urging leaders to focus on humanitarian aid and renewable energy in the region. The African civil society alleges that some politicians and wealthy nations are, quote, hell-bent on pushing the carbon markets agenda. It says major commitments have been made, including a $450 million pledge by the UAE Carbon Alliance to significantly increase carbon credit production in Africa by 2030. Millions of dollars have been pledged by the UK, Germany, and Climate Asset Management. It says the African Carbon Markets Initiative is the latest carbon credit scheme that politicians and businesses are pushing for, claiming it will resolve Africa's climate change problem. Power Shift Africa says the region has the resources and leadership to address the climate crisis without such initiatives. It stresses that the continent needs real solutions and should not be fooled by, quote, someone else's problem. A Canadian man who killed 4 members of the Afzaal family has pleaded not guilty. Nathaniel Veltman hit 5 members of the same family with his pickup truck in June 2021 in London, Ontario. According to prosecutors, Veltman intentionally hit the Afzaal family because of their faith. He is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Jury selection for his trial began yesterday. The trial, which has moved from London to Windsor, is expected to last 12 weeks. The attack killed Salman Afzaal, his wife Madiha Salman, their daughter Yumna, and their grandmother Talat Afzaal. Their 9-year-old son was seriously injured but survived. Prosecutors believe Veltman's actions were guided by far-right beliefs related to white supremacy. The incident has deeply shaken Canadians and has led to calls against Islamophobia. More than 60 Muslim schoolgirls have refused to take off their abaya in French schools despite the recent ban. The French government recently imposed a ban on the abaya, which is a loose, floor-length garment worn by Muslim women, as a sign of modesty. The French government says the garment opposes its principle of secularism. The new school session began Monday, and despite the new rule, 298 female students in different regions of the country showed up at schools wearing an abaya. Out of them, 67 refused to take off their abaya. French Education Minister Gabriel Attal told a media source that the ban is in place so that students are not identified by their religion by looking at the attire. A Muslim rights group has taken the ban to court. The lawyer for the Muslim Rights Action wrote on social media platform X that they have filed an appeal with the Council of State to seek the suspension of the Abaya ban at school. He calls the ban a violation of, quote, several fundamental freedoms. The French top court has started examining the case this afternoon. The controversial ban has sparked a backlash against the government. In recent years, the French government has been criticized for targeting Muslims with statements and policies, including raids on mosques and charitable foundations. It has also received a backlash for an anti-separatism law that imposes broad restrictions on the community. There is a growing speculation that the Indian government, led by India's Hindu Nationalist Party, wants to rename the country Bharat. The controversy arose when invitations for the upcoming dinner with G20 leaders refer to the country as Bharat rather than India. The government has not yet officially confirmed this. The move has sparked a row in the country. India is gearing up to host the 18th G20 summit, which will be held later this week in the capital, New Delhi. Media reports say the name will be changed during a special session of Parliament later this month. The agenda for this special session is not known yet. The opposition Congress Party has criticized the government's move. It says the ruling party is trying to change the country's name for political purposes. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party is defending the proposal. The party spokesman says Bharat is the ancient name of India and a matter of national pride. The need for this change appears to have risen because a coalition of 26 opposition parties has adopted the name Indian National Democratic Inclusive Alliance, abbreviated as India. For more on calls to repatriate Canadian men detained in Syrian jails. Stay tuned. A delegation from the Palestinian Authority will travel to Riyadh to discuss Ramallah's role in a possible normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The meeting will be held between officials from the US, Saudi Arabia, and Palestine. The news comes after months of efforts by Washington to normalize ties between the kingdom and Israel. The Palestinian delegation includes Deputy to President Mahmoud Abbas and a senior diplomatic advisor, as well as the head of Palestinian Authority's intelligence agency. Palestinian sources familiar with the upcoming visit say the delegation will discuss the issues raised by Saudi Arabia without putting forward any demands. In the past, Palestinian Authority has opposed the US-sponsored normalization agreements between Israel and other Arab states. However, some members of Palestinian Authority believe they could benefit politically and financially if they align, as normalization seems inevitable. A senior Palestinian official has told the media source that Palestine will not likely receive anything except, quote, money and some non-enforceable political gestures from the normalization. Saudi Arabia has also proposed resuming financial support for Palestine, which has been frozen since 2020. Analysts believe that Saudi Arabia is seeking Palestinian approval of the agreement to mitigate potential backlash from the Arab and Muslim community. Canadian mother Sally Lane has expressed immense joy on the news that her son Jack Letts is alive in a Syrian prison, even though sources say he is barely hanging on after years of no contact. Letts is one of many foreigners held in camps and prisons run by the US-backed Kurdish forces in regions once dominated by the terrorist group ISIS. A civil society delegation delivered the news after meeting Canadian detainees during their visit to Syria. Jack converted to Islam as a teenager, traveled from Jordan to Kuwait and eventually arrived in Syria. He was captured by Kurdish forces in 2017 while fleeing Syria. Lane has been working for years to repatriate her son. Jack's situation sheds light on the Canadian government's reluctance to repatriate male detainees from Syria, despite bringing home some women and children. Lawyers for Jack and 3 other detained Canadian men claim the government is selectively helping its citizens, violating their constitutional rights. They are asking the Supreme Court to challenge a recent ruling that the government is not legally obligated to repatriate the detainees. The Supreme Court will soon decide whether to hear the appeal. Sally Lane believes that her son has a right to return to Canada and is asking the court to recognize that right. Invasive animal and plant species are causing great harm in many countries around the world. According to a recent UN report, about 37,000 alien species have been introduced worldwide, either intentionally or accidentally. Of these, 3,500 have proven harmful. Experts estimate that the global economic damage caused by invasive species was around $423 billion in 2019. Australia has been unsuccessfully battling the invasive cane toad for many years. Originally from South and Central America, it was introduced to Queensland in 1935 to control beetles damaging sugarcane crops. However, it soon spread into the wild, to the north coast and further west, despite efforts to eradicate it. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services of UN has found that since 2019, the number of invasive species is rapidly increasing. The report's author says these species pose serious threats to biodiversity and may lead to permanent ecological damage, including the extinction of native species. These species also pose a threat to human health and livelihoods. The invasive water hyacinth has affected the condition of Lake Victoria in Africa. The dengue-spreading Aedes aegypti mosquito is also an invasive species. Another author of the report says the environmental impact of the problematic species is felt everywhere. He says these species have contributed to 60% of global animal and plant extinctions. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Sound Vision, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.